A very good afternoon to one and all. On behalf of IEEE Pune section, I, Shreyas Joshi, welcome you all to this second session on the first day of Pune section Students, Young Professionals and Women in Engineering Congress 2020. Before we move ahead, let us take a moment to remember the legend Bharat Ratna Sir M. Vishweshwaraya on his birth anniversary celebrated as Engineers Day. Our speaker for this session, Mr. Rohan Agawne sir, is someone who is a mechanical engineer from IIT Bombay, also an MBA graduate from IIM Ahmedabad, and now an IAS currently serving as Sub-District Magistrate for South Sikkim. He has faced and conquered three of the toughest exams in India, JEE, CAT, and UPSC, which makes him a perfect mentor and guide for the young engineers and professionals like us. Now I request Mr. P.B. Mane sir, Chair for Students Activities Committee, IEEE Pune section, to add a welcome note.
Yeah, thank you, Shreyas. A very good afternoon to one and all present. Once again, Happy Engineers Day to all who have gathered over here. In fact, I feel proud today to welcome Rohan Agawne. I've observed him through his childhood days, and he is the perfect choice for our today's program. And I would like to thank him for giving us his valuable time and readily agreeing to address all of you. As rightly said by Shreyas, I can say that the inputs which he gives will surely benefit all of you. And nothing more to be said. The moments are proud enough for me to again thank Rohan, and let us enjoy his journey, how he has been through and how he has achieved his targets and goals. A very important thing, because as I mentioned that I have seen him through his childhood, his dedication has brought him to this level today. Thank you, Rohan, once again, and all the participants. Enjoy the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mane sir. Now, without spending more time, let's hear from Mr. Rohan Agawne sir about his journey, three different perspectives, preparation tactics, and how to take major career decisions. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. First of all, I would like to thank IEEE Pune section and Pradeep Mane sir for having me here today with you. It's always a pleasure to interact with all the youngsters and all the future aspirants. So we'll be dividing this session into three parts today. In the first section, I'll be covering my story from IIT Bombay to IAS. In the second part, I'll be talking about the mindset that is required to be had in competitive exams. And lastly, we'll have an open Q&A session. Okay, so let's begin with the first part of the session. And I would like to start with one question to all of you. Have you ever felt lost and you don't know what to do ahead in life? Have you ever felt that you don't know what is the purpose of your life and there is no one to show you the path ahead? Well, I'm quite sure that most of us are in this situation, and more so in the early age. Today I'm going to share my story in which I had three such prominent events in which I felt lost. And that feeling of being lost led to achieve my purpose, led it to know to me what is the purpose of my life. And that is the story that I'm going to share with you all today. Okay. So to know this story, let's go back to the year 2004 when I was in 9th standard. And that time, cricket was my only passion. I was playing for a club called Pune Youth Club, which is popularly known in Pune as PYC Club. I was an opening batsman, all-rounder there. And I not just enjoyed playing cricket, but I used to watch cricket a lot. Not just as a form of entertainment, but also to learn from the best of the best players. How do they play? How do they react in different kinds of situations? And I was so much into it that I wouldn't miss even a single ball of a match. You would be knowing, all the cricket fans would be knowing that when India tours Australia, the events start at 6 a.m. in the morning. The match starts at 6 a.m. in the morning and it goes up to 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So this time overlaps with the school timing, right? So what I used to do is I used to bunk the school. I used to miss the classes just to watch those matches. My parents used to be really furious with me for doing so. But I was so passionate, I was so into it that I didn't want to miss it. And I used to somehow convince them. This dedication for cricket led me to excel in that field. And later on, I represented this club to play in England and went on a tour to play against the local clubs in England. And it was a very good experience for me. I received Man of the Match award in one of the events there, in one of the matches there. And my coach was really happy with my performance. What this did was, it instilled a sense of confidence in me. And I made a resolve that next time when I come back to India, I'm going to work even harder and I'm going to make a career in cricket. But my parents had some other plans for me. They were not quite happy with me being involved into cricket so much. And there were several reasons for that. I was one of the toppers of the class. I was really good in academics. And they rightly felt that cricket is an uncertain field. You don't know. And in those days, I'm talking about 2004, when we didn't have that many options like we have today. IPL and several other such tournaments are happening. But in those days, there was a lot of uncertainty. And hence, my parents wanted me to continue in academics only. On top of that, I was in 9th standard. And you know how parents get anxious when the students and when the children enter 9th standard, because next year is going to be 10th standard, the milestone event. And when I was on tour for England for 30 days, I had missed my school for 30 days. So they were really worried about that also. But I had a resolve. I was firm to continue playing cricket. So this led to frequent arguments with me and my parents. Every afternoon, every evening, we would be sitting on a table. On one side, it would be me against my parents, and they would be sending in their arguments. I would be showing my arguments. And this kept on going for a while until I made a big blunder. At that time, I used to play cricket for 2 hours. I used to go for evening sessions for 2 hours for practicing in the club. In the same club, there was a morning batch also for 2 hours. So I was thinking that if I have to make a career in this field, why should I settle for just 2 hours? I should go for the morning session also and should practice for at least 4 hours in a day. And that meant not going to school. And I made this proposal to my parents, which was probably the biggest mistake I did. Because obviously they wouldn't accept this proposal. They thought it's too much now. But I had a logical argument also. One of those arguments was the most successful cricketer, Sachin Tendulkar, he is also 10th fail. And academics have no relation with cricket. So why should I keep going to school when I've decided that I want to make a career in cricket? And that was the end of the story of cricket. Because then my parents thought, no, enough is enough. Now you need to focus only on studies. This is getting too much. Yes, that was a blunder I made. Because till that time, they were ready to let me continue cricket till the time I was focusing also on my studies. So forget it. Anyways, that was the first part of the story. So for so long, I was believing that the purpose of my life is to make a career in cricket. But suddenly that purpose was taken away from me. And I felt lost. This was the first time when I felt lost. And then I started exploring options. What is it that I can do? And I made me understand myself that it's okay. Not everyone can choose an uncommon path for their career. So let me do something in academics in which I'm already good at. And at that age, you're not very mature. You don't know what is it that you really want to do. And hence you're influenced by so many people around you. Your teachers, your parents, your friends. So I was brought up in a family of engineers, and hence the obvious next choice was to be an engineer. So at that moment, a friend of mine who was 2 years elder to me, he had cleared IIT JEE. and he had got into IIT Kharagpur. That is the first time that I got to know about IITs. And hence I decided that now, since I've decided to be an engineer, let me try for the best institutes in the country. And that's how I started preparing for IIT JEE. My parents wanted me to go to Kota, which is considered to be a hub of preparation for JEE. But I didn't want to go. I didn't want to stay away from family. And I promised them that I will try my best sitting here. And that's what they agreed to finally. Fortunately, things went well, and I cleared JEE in my first attempt, and I got into mechanical engineering at IIT Bombay. So, after I got into IIT, just like every other engineering student, life becomes so easy. You are not really concerned what is going to happen next. You're just enjoying your student days. You're just chilling with your friends. You're not concerned what you're going to do ahead. And that's what I did for the initial 2 years. It was a fun time, right? Like every other engineering student does, I was also doing the same. It was only at the end of the second year that I went for my first internship experience at a company called Volkswagen. And that internship, it changed my perspective to a certain extent. Reality started hitting me at that point, and I started thinking, okay, I have had fun for these last 2 years, but this can't keep going on. Now I have to think what I have to do next. Till that time, I was thinking engineering is what I would like to do. But that experience at internship was not so pleasing for me. Then again, at the end of the third year, I had second internship experience at Coca-Cola company. So these two internship experiences, it made me realize that engineering is probably not my cup of tea. This is not probably something that I want to do. Then I went back and started thinking, how did I come here? The choice of becoming an engineer was not something that I had derived from my own. It was something which was influenced by the people around me. But this internship experience made me realize that this is not where I would like to work. And so I started exploring for the other options. And this is the second time when I felt lost. I was not sure what is the purpose of my life. So generally what happens in IITs is that in the last year, when students are certain that they don't want to go for a job and they would like to go for higher studies, then they majorly go for two options. One is preparing for GRE and second is preparing for CAT. So I was never inclined to go out of India, and hence GRE was never in my consideration list. So I started preparing for CAT. Okay. Unfortunately, things went well, and I got into IIM Ahmedabad. So after getting into IIM Ahmedabad, the first year and let me point out two things here. The reason why I chose to go into IIM Ahmedabad at this point, there were two major reasons. One, I thought probably engineering is something that I don't like to do, or the kind of engineering job I would not like to do. Maybe I'll enjoy doing a managerial job, working in the top level management of a company. Maybe that is something that will excite me. And the second reason was it was a time buying option. I thought maybe these 2 years will give me more exposure, will help me understand things in a better way, and then I can make an informed decision. So the first year at IIM Ahmedabad, it was really hectic year. And I was totally into academics, and hence I could not think much beyond the college or what I want to do ahead. But then at the end of the first year, again we have to go for an internship. So I was doing my internship at Mahindra & Mahindra Automotive in Mumbai, which is the headquarters of Mahindra company. I had received a very good project there. They gave me a lot of autonomy in working. I was staying in Mumbai. I was staying with my family. I was working in one of my favorite sectors, which is automotive sector, and probably one of the most successful companies in that sector. The company was giving me autonomy. It was giving me independence to implement my ideas. And on top of that, the pay was really good. They were paying me 55,000 rupees per month as my stipend during that day, during those days. I'm talking about 2013. And this amount is quite good. It's more than decent because it's more than what most of the jobs get in India today. But somehow, in spite of all these good factors, having a good pay, staying in Mumbai, one of the probably the best cities in the country, staying with my family, getting the opportunity to implement my ideas, still somewhere I felt something is missing. The work culture at the private sector somehow did not excite me. It was my third internship experience, so I had already worked for more than 6 months in a private sector, and that environment was something that really did not excite me. And on top of that, I did not derive that satisfaction of doing a job, of doing something productive at the end of those 2 months. And this is the third time that I felt lost. But probably this was the last time that I felt lost, because now I was even closer to the purpose of my life than ever before. Around the same time, another prominent event happened. So during IIM Ahmedabad, during my stay there, we are also taken for a social visit. So I was part of a social visit to an NGO which worked for the salt pan workers in Rann of Kutch. For people who don't know much about Rann of Kutch, let me tell you, it's a desert area. It's a complete arid desert where the temperatures range from probably somewhere close to zero during cold areas to maximum 45 to 50 degrees during the peak summers. And it's complete desert, believe me. There is nothing around it. No schools, no hospitals, no habitation, nothing. And it is in such areas that salt is processed, it's produced in India. Around 70 to 80% of the total salt of the country is produced here. So we were taken to this field to understand the plight of the salt pan workers. And I consider myself really fortunate to be a part of this event. I got an opportunity to interact with one of the salt pan workers there named Lallan. And I had a brief discussion with me, and I asked him, how do you feel here? How is it working here? And I'm translating what he said to me in Hindi. I'm translating it into English. And he said, Saab, there were almost tears in his eyes when he told me this, that it's a very difficult job. This is not something that we choose out of our own choice, but we are forced to be into this. He told me that they have to work in this area for around 8 months out of the entire year. And he told me that he had 2 children, one 8-year-old and one 10-year-old. Then I asked him, when you come for work here, how do you manage to send your children to school? And then he said, no, they don't go to school because there are no schools here and they cannot keep them anywhere else. So that means they're totally out of the education system, which also means that they're permanently stuck into this profession, because without education, they cannot come out of this vicious circle. And top of that, he told me certain other things. He said that for this job, they are paid meager amount of 50 to 60 rupees per ton. And to give you an idea, the market price per ton is somewhere around close to 4,000 rupees. And they were paid just 50 to 60 rupees. Not just that, they have to work bare hand, barefoot into salt all the time. And that has a heavy impact on their health. Their legs become really stiff. He told me that sometimes what happens is when the bodies are cremated, the legs become so stiff that some parts of the body, they don't burn completely. And those parts have to be cremated somewhere else, they have to be buried somewhere else. It was such a sad story to hear. And at that moment, I started questioning myself. What is the use of the knowledge that I've gained so far if I cannot solve the issues of these people? Yes, I can work in the biggest of the biggest MNCs. I can earn big fat packages. Yes, that will help to contribute to the GDP of the country, definitely. and in a way it will help to reduce poverty. But I wanted to do something else which will directly impact the lives of the people, which I can see through my eyes. And this combination, the experience at Mahindra and this social visit, the feeling that I had of being lost, now I felt I know what is the purpose of my life. I wanted to do something for such people to uplift them. And at this moment, I started having discussions with my mentors. I realized the importance of mentors at this moment. Mentors are someone who guide you. Even today, when I face any challenges, when I face any difficulties, mentors are the first persons to whom I run to seek their advice because they have so much vast experience. And I was fortunate to have two such mentors who are into public sector, who are into public service. They are bureaucrats. So I discussed these issues with them openly and frankly. And after that discussion, after my introspection, and after my own exploration of the opportunities that I had, I felt I want to be in civil service because this is the field where I can directly impact the lives of such people. I can help many Lallans climb up the ladder. And that's why I decided to go for UPSC. So when I decided to go for UPSC, so let me tell you a brief about UPSC. Generally, people think that UPSC is an examination only for IAS and IPS. No, it makes recruitment for 22 services. IAS, IPS, IFS being only a few of those. But I had decided that I would choose this field only if I get into IAS or IPS, which were my first top two preferences. Then, in the first attempt, I could not get into any of these, and I got into AFHQ, some other service. But I did not join that service because I had already decided that I'll only go for the top two preferences. I was fortunate to get into IPS in my second attempt. And then I went for the training. But then I decided that let's have another attempt. Let's try one more last time. Probably this time I'll get into IAS. So another thing I like to mention here is in IAS and IPS, we have cadre system. Cadre means that when you get into the services, you are allotted one state and you work in that state for the entire period, for the entire career. Not entire career, but at least 50% of your career you have to spend in that particular state, and that is called your cadre. So in IPS, I was allotted a cadre called AGMUD, which comprises of all the union territories of the country. And you spend a major part of your career in Delhi. So IPS, the Indian Police Service, and the cadre AGMUD is considered to be one of the best cadres for IPS because Delhi Police is considered to be one of the strongest police institutions in the country. Okay, so in the third attempt, I got into IAS. And this time, I knew that I would have to make a little compromise on my cadre because I wouldn't get the top preferences of my cadre. I knew that based on my rank. So I knew that probably I'm going to get one of the northeastern states or a challenging state like a Jammu Kashmir. That time it was Jammu Kashmir. So again, this was a very prominent phase of my life. I had to make a very important decision. On one hand, I had IPS with probably the best cadre in the service. On the other hand, I had IAS, which was my first preference, but the cadre I knew is not going to be amongst my top preferences. But then again, what helped me to make the decision was understanding the purpose of my life that I had derived through my own experiences. My purpose, I felt, was to help in the upliftment of the people like Lallan. And I thought that if I want to work in a social sector, then definitely IAS is going to give me better opportunities than IPS. So finally, I went for IAS over IPS because IAS gave me more opportunities to serve in the social sector. And second reason being, I always wanted to be in close connection with academics. Let me tell you that even today, I am pursuing one online course called it's called a micro master's degree. It's somewhat like a miniature version of a master's degree. I'm pursuing a micro master's degree from MIT USA into developmental economics because this is something I'm really passionate about. This is something which is closely related to the purpose of my life. And hence, the clarity of this purpose of my life led me to choose IS over IPS. And here I stand today. This is how I've traveled this path. This is how I've come here. There are several lessons to learn that I would like to share from this story, but there's only the one prominent lesson that I would like all of you to know from this is that it's important to know the purpose of your life. And that purpose has to be known from your own self. Nobody else can tell you that. If you're following the advice given by someone else, then probably you're following the purpose of that person. You're not following the purpose of your own. So it's really important that you find out the purpose of your life on your own, through introspection, through talking to mentors, through talking to the right people, and through acceptance of the experiences that you have derived so far. At the same time, I would also like to urge all of you that when you define this purpose, dream big. Don't have a small purpose. Don't think that I would like to have a big car, a big house, or just running after materialistic pleasures. It's always better to have a purpose, a big purpose, and a purpose greater than you yourself, because that is something which will give you eternal happiness. Let me ask you something. You must have bought something new at some point of time, maybe a new bike, a new phone, right? A new laptop. Whenever you buy something new, you derive some pleasure, right? But does that pleasure last for too long? Do you get the same pleasure after 6 months of using that device? No. After a few days, it's just a meager device, and you stop deriving that pleasure. This is what happens when you run after materialistic pleasures. You believe that is happiness, but it is not. It is just a momentary pleasure. But when you help someone grow, when you help someone come out of distress, you derive some eternal happiness. And whenever you think about that moment, you'll always feel happy. You'll always feel delighted. So this is one thing that I would like to share with you. It's always better to have a purpose, a big purpose than you yourself. And one more thing happens when you define the purpose which is bigger than you yourself. What it does is it makes you forget all your own personal worries, because now you're more concerned about other people. Let me share another example to help you understand this better. So I told you that when I got into IIM into the second year after internship, I had decided to go for civil services. You must have heard about the rigorous placement process at IIMs. You have to dedicate at least 2 hours daily to prepare for the placement process at IIMs, especially at IIM Ahmedabad. That is what I know about. You have to give 2 hours daily. So I started thinking that now, since I've already decided that I want to go for civil services, why should I waste these 2 hours? There's no sense. Instead, I could use those 2 hours for my UPSC preparation or for something else productive. But when I've decided that I don't want to go for a job, why should I waste those 2 hours daily? So out of the batch of 450 at IIM Ahmedabad, I was the first person to choose to drop out of the placement process. Why did I do that? Because so that I could relieve myself from that commitment of giving 2 hours daily. Okay. So what happened after that was something I had never imagined. I made a decision, and let me thank my parents, without whose support I would have never taken this bold decision of quitting out of the recruitment process. It was their support that helped me take this bold decision. So after I took this decision, After a few days, when the placement process started, I saw my friends, my close friends, getting into the biggest of the biggest companies, the big MNCs. Somebody is getting placed in Singapore, somebody is getting placed in London, somebody in Mumbai, Delhi, getting big fat packages. And I felt a little awkward at that time. I started questioning myself. Whatever I have done, is it the right decision? Should I have dropped out of the placement process? And I started deviating from my purpose when I saw my friends getting those big offers. But then, whenever I was reminded about that purpose of my life, it helped me to come back on track. I knew that this is the thing that I want to do in life. And maybe those fat packages and those big MNCs, maybe they are not going to help me in achieving that purpose. And that is why I've chosen this different path, and I should continue on that. So the point here is, when you focus your energies on the problems of others, you forget your own problems. Try that with a small thing, and you will experience it yourself. So this is the learning that I would like to share, that please define a purpose which is bigger than you, and then try to work towards it and trust the process. Okay, so here we come to the end of my story. Now let's move on to the second part, which is the mindset that is required to prepare for competitive exams. Now, I'm not going to go deeper into the format of the exam, the different kinds of papers, because I know that information is openly available. And I'm going to share my email ID with the organizers. They would be sharing my email ID with you. If anyone wants to have any help regarding that, you could send me an email and I'll definitely respond to you. So, but I'm going to talk about the general tips. So let me first talk about CAT. So in CAT, the aspirants would be knowing that there are 3 papers. One is verbal ability and reading comprehension. Second is data interpretation and logical reasoning. And third is quantitative ability. So out of these 3 papers, 2 are related to mathematics. And these students coming from engineering background, generally you find it a little comfortable compared to others. So you don't have to work too much into it. Where the students, aspirants from engineering background struggle is the first paper, which is verbal ability and reading comprehension. So I would like to share that it's better to focus a larger part of your preparation time on this paper. And there are several ways to do that, but prominently being, you need to have good reading comprehension. For that, you need to do lots of reading practice. And when you do reading practice, please refer to the standard books. Please refer to the standard authors such as Dan Brown, Ayn Rand. Please refer to those kind who use really tough English. Because what that will help you to do is that when you keep reading, it will help you increase your reading speed. It will help you improve your vocabulary, and it will also improve your comprehension skills. Okay, so this is one thing. And when you're preparing for the other mathematical portion, it's important that you focus more on speed. See, the difficulty level in CAT is not that high, but what is important is to have good speed, and that speed comes through practice. So it's important that you dedicate a large amount of time on practicing, daily practicing. Okay. Another question that many MBA aspirants ask me is, when is it the right time to go for MBA? To that I respond that there's no clear answer to that. Through my story, I've been focusing on one thing, which is finding the purpose of your life. So the right question to ask is, what is that purpose? Once that purpose is clear, automatically you'll know which path to take. Whether you should go for MBA now, whether you should go for MBA later, it really doesn't make any difference. But it all depends on your purpose. So I urge you all to first ask the right question, which is finding your purpose, and then decide when do you want to go for MBA. And honestly, it doesn't matter much. Whether you go immediately after engineering or whether you go after a break, it really doesn't matter much. Okay. So now I'll talk a little brief about UPSC examination. I'll be talking about the general myths that aspirants have. Myth number one, that you need to know everything under the sky to clear UPSC. This is not at all correct. UPSC, if you go to website, you will find that UPSC has clearly defined syllabus with even mentioning the subtopics, even subtopics, and you have to focus only on those topics. So it's not that you need to know everything. You need to know the syllabus and prepare accordingly. Of course, the syllabus is too vast. It's vast like an ocean. But there are certain boundaries to it, and you have to prepare within those boundaries. Okay? The second myth that we have is that you need to go to Delhi for UPSC preparation. See, there was a time, maybe 10-15 years back, when resources for studying, the study material, maybe it was not easily available to the aspirants so easily. And hence it made sense to go to a hub like Delhi or Hyderabad to prepare for this competitive exam. But today everything is available at the tip of a finger. Everything is available on internet. And if you read the interviews of so many toppers, you'll find that many don't go for coaching. I didn't go for coaching. I didn't go to Delhi. I prepared on my own. Of course, I joined test series, but that also I gave sitting at home. I used to mail the scanned copies of my answers, but I did not step out of my house to prepare for UPSC. Okay, so the second myth, going to Delhi, it is a myth. You don't need to go to Delhi. Don't need to spend that much to prepare for this competitive exam. The third myth, which is related to this, is you need to go for coaching, which I've already spoken about. It is not at all absolutely necessary. Everything is available on internet. If you read the interviews of the toppers, you will get to know what are the different strategies that most aspirants generally employ. And that will help you to prepare. Myth number 4, you need to have a strong academic background to excel in this exam. Not at all. You will find cases where aspirants have failed in 12th standard and they have went on to clear the UPSC exam later on. So your academic background you don't need to have strong academic background at all. People from very humble background have cleared this exam with their dedication, with their hard work. Again, why were they able to do that? It's because their purpose was very clear in front of them. Okay? So these are the general tips. Now I'll be coming to the mindset that you need to have when you prepare for any competitive exam. So here I'll be talking about 5 main points. And the first point, which I've already stressed upon too much, is finding the purpose. It is your purpose which gives you the fire, the determination to continue with the effort. There will be times when you prepare for competitive exams, especially an exam like UPSC, where the exam itself goes for 1 year and the preparation is required at least 1 year. So you're going to be there in the process of examination for at least 2 years. It's a long, tedious process. You need to have patience, and during that period, there will be times when you will feel low. So you need something that will lift you up, that will help you to come back on the path, on the track once again. And your purpose is something which will help you to derive that energy. It will give you that fire to stay on track. Second thing that I'm going to talk about is smart work versus hard work. We keep talking about hard work, but today what is more relevant is smart work. Now let me give you a few examples which will illustrate what is the difference between smart work and hard work. So when I was preparing for UPSC, answer writing is something which is really important. Okay. So what many aspirants do, I'm not saying that that's a wrong strategy, but there's something which worked for me, and that is what I'm sharing with you. What most aspirants they do is that when they practice answer writing, they'll write the entire paper at one go. It's a 3-hour long duration paper. They'll sit and write at one point. I have tried that strategy, but what I experienced at the end of it was that you are really tired. you don't feel like doing anything after that, because can you imagine writing for 3 hours continuously? Your hands are aching, you're mentally tired, you're physically fatigued. So instead, I thought maybe it's a better idea that I pick up maybe 2 or 3 questions every day, and I dedicate 1 hour or half an hour, and then I practice those 2 or 3 questions every day during that 1 hour slot. Now, what that helps you is that it helps you to focus on the quality of the answers. When you are writing an exam, you are more concerned about finishing that paper. But here I'm not concerned much about finishing those papers. I'm concerned more about the quality of my answers. And on top of that, I also have time to self-assess myself. I can make an assessment of the answers that I've written. I can compare those answers with the ideal answer copies that are provided, and check where am I going wrong? What is it that I'm doing correct? And can you imagine if you practice this daily on daily basis? Okay, so this is one example of smart work versus hard work. Of course, this is applicable for every exam, not just for UPSC. Let me give another example. We see that a part of the syllabus, for one part of the syllabus for any competitive exam, you have so many books available. What many aspirants do is that for the same syllabus, they'll refer to 2 or 3 books, different books. I would instead recommend you read the same book 3 times. Why? Because when you read the same book 3 times, it stays in your memory for longer. When you read the same thing, when you see the same thing again and again and again, it stays in your memory for much longer time. So it's a better strategy that you revise the same book maybe 2 or 3 times instead of going for 3 different sources for the same syllabus. This is another example of smart work. One last example of smart work I'll give you is that we generally, when we see a big syllabus for a competitive exam or for any exam, we start fumbling. We don't know where to start from. We don't know how we are going to complete the syllabus. At that moment, it's important that you break it into several smaller parts and look at only one part at one time. See, when you're given a task and you feel that it is not achievable, probably you don't give your full effort, because you feel anyway it's waste giving the entire effort, right? If you don't feel it is achievable. So it's better that you divide it into small parts, and then every part you feel that it is achievable, and then you give your best, you give your full efforts in achieving that small part. Okay, so I hope the idea of smart work versus hard work is clear now. Let me now come to the third part. The third point is being disciplined. It is extremely important to be disciplined. We have heard about it so many times. I think almost everyone knows the importance of this. They make timetable, they make planning for the exam, they do everything. But the only problem is they don't follow it, which is the most important part. And there are several reasons why you are not able to follow it. So I would just like to share a few tips which probably will help you to follow that timetable and follow your planning. One thing, again, the thing that I've been stressing upon so much is purpose. Once you know that purpose, you will give up everything for that. You will have that fire to prove something, to do something. That will help you stay committed and to follow that timetable. Another thing which you can do is find an accountability partner. Maybe you can have your teachers, don't have your friends as your accountability partner, because probably they are also sailing in the same ship. So they may not be able to hold you accountable. So probably you can have your teachers or your gurus, or maybe you have someone elder in your house as your accountability partner. So what you do is you prepare a plan for 1 month and you tell your accountability partner that I am going to cover this much at the end of this month. Then you know you are answerable to someone, and hence you will try your best to achieve that. Another thing which will help you is talking to mentors, or even having your mentors as your accountability partner. Because you know that when you go to talk to mentors, you respect them, and hence you know that you have to follow certain things. right? So this is another thing, another tip for achieving this objective. The point number 4 now I come to, which is self-study. We have been brought up in an education system where we have been told to look after spoon feeding. Every small thing, every syllabus, we are spoon fed. This is the exam. These are the questions that you need to prepare for exam. These are the questions that you're going to get in your exam. This is the syllabus you need to cover. Anything out of it, we get confused. But it's important that you focus more on self-study. Today, everything is available on internet. All the resources, all the study materials, everything, all the guiding tips, the interviews, the mentorship program, everything is available on internet. But the problem is that we don't trust ourselves. We feel that there has to be someone who should be holding our hand throughout this process of examination. But you have to trust yourself. You have to focus on self-assessment, self-preparation. And trust me, the process itself is it's enlightening. You learn so many things when you do everything on your own, and when you rely less on others, on coaching, on waiting for someone to tell you. You should be more focused on self-study. And the last point that I want to talk about, the last point important in having a right mindset is having the right mental state. Probably this is the most important point out of these 5. See, today there are so many distractions available around you. So many distractions. Your mobile phone is a distraction. Maybe there's so many ads keep going on and they're looking for your attention for those materialistic pleasures. So many things, so much is distraction around you. How do you stay focused in this situation? You cannot be focused unless you have the right state of mind. You should be in a right state of mind where the purpose, your focus should be crystal clear to you, and you should be guided by that single-minded focus. And that is achievable only when you are in the right state of mind. Now, there are several ways to achieve that, to work upon your mental health. Like, for example, I follow a practice meditation technique called Vipassana. There are so many other techniques available. You can go for yoga, so many other forms of meditation. But the technique that you follow is irrelevant. What's important is that you work on your mental health as much as you go for your work on your physical health. We are so much concerned about looking good. We go for gym, we go for exercise. But what we fail to account for is working upon your mental health. And this is the most important strength that you need to have when you prepare for competitive exams. So with this, I'd like to conclude with this second part of the session. Now we can have a few question answers, and I'll be glad to answer them.
For this beautiful session, I think Shreyas can take few questions.
Yes. Most of the parts are already nicely covered by sir. So one question that I have myself, and I'm sure that many of the students will also have this, that your stand about working and studying simultaneously. Is it necessary to take a gap for UPSC or any public service exam for that matter? Like we have seen many people who take gap for preparation of UPSC. What is your stand about this? So.
See, I think I briefly mentioned in my talk that UPSC you need to have at least 1 year of preparation. Okay, so 1 year of preparation for the exam, and the exam itself goes on for 1 year. It's a very long preparation process. Okay, so if you are going for working, if you are working simultaneously, obviously you are not going to get that much time to prepare. So probably you are not going to complete that syllabus in 1 year. So
okay.
If you ask me whether you should work or not, the straight answer is you should not work. But I understand that this may not be possible for everyone. It may not be possible. Like you may have some financial commitments or some other issues because of which you feel that maybe it's better. Some people think that when I'm working, I'm in a better state of mind, and then I can focus more on preparation. So in that case, it's okay. You can prepare while you are working. but it's important that you stay dedicated. I have seen many friends of mine who think that they will prepare while they're working. They start well, but they're not able to continue for too long. Because obviously when you're working, you have so many excuses also to not work for it. You may say, I have a deadline in the office, I'm too tired, I'm commuting for 1 hour every day, I feel tired, I don't have energy. Weekend is the only time I get to spend with my family, with my friends, right? So the number of excuses probably you're going to have more when you're working, but it's important that if you feel that you can stay focused even while you're working, then definitely you should go for it. But yes, to answer straight, I think it's better to take a break and prepare, because then you can guide all your energies, all your focus on that one purpose.
Right. So there is another question specific to UPSC, that how to select optional subjects for UPSC.
Okay. See, another related question I'll answer the same time. There are many people who want to know that where do you start from? This is the basic doubt that most UPSC aspirants have, and it's related to that. So let me answer these two questions simultaneously. See, generally you start from NCERT textbooks. Why do you do that? Is because nothing generally. If I talk about UPSC mains examination, probably nothing will come from NCERT textbooks, but you still read those textbooks to develop that foundation. When you have that foundation, only then you can add value to that. So NCERT just helps you to develop that foundation, and that is the most important part of this process. So now the another related question asked is, should we start from 6th standard, should we start from 8th standard, should we start from 10th standard? So it really depends at what level you are right now. If you are someone who are really good in academics when you were school, and if you feel that okay, I can manage by just flipping through it, I don't need to spend too much time into building this foundation, then probably you can just skip through the 11th and 12th standard NCERTs. If you're not really confident, then probably you can start from 6th standard, but generally on average it's better to start from 8th standard NCERTs. You can start from there. This is the starting point. In addition to this, you should also be reading one current affairs newspaper. I personally preferred Indian Express. Most people go for Hindu, but I felt Indian Express has much better content than Hindu. Okay, so now you start with NCERT textbooks, you build your foundation, and then you come to your standard textbooks. And when you come to your standard textbooks, then you have to divide your time for preparation. Then you have to go for prelims directly. You don't start with the preparation for mains. You go for prelims. You don't go for preparation of prelims. I'm sorry. You start the preparation for mains directly. Why? Because when you prepare for mains, already most components of the prelims syllabus are covered in that. So then just 2 to 3 months before your prelims exam, you can completely focus on your prelims. But till that time, you should be continuing with your mains preparation. And when you come to standard textbooks, you have to roughly divide your time 50-50 into preparation for the general studies and optional subject. So now, when you have gone through this, building this foundation, gone through the NCERTs, it will make you a little clear which subjects you find interesting. Now, my optional was political science, but everyone may not like this subject. So when you're developing this foundation, you would have already read through so many subjects: economics, history, geography, culture, maybe so much. Then you have to understand what is it that interests you. Because remember, out of the total preparation for UPSC, almost 50% you have to dedicate for the preparation of optional. So if you're going to dedicate so much time to it, it should be really interesting to you. So the first major component is interest. Whether do you really find it interesting? You might go for trend and see that okay, maybe geography optional is doing well, mathematics optional is doing well. But if you don't find it interesting, then probably it's not going to help you. So interest is one thing. Second thing is the availability of the resources. If you feel that the study material is easily available, and generally this issue is not there today, if everything is easily available, so you should have the availability of the books, the coaching, if you want to go for coaching, the test series. So these are the factors, but yes, interest is the primary factor.
With this reference, sir, as you just mentioned, that the resources, there is a question, which should be the medium chosen for UPSC preparation, and Another question is, what UPSC expects from the candidates?
So you medium, I mean, I hope it means the language.
Yes.
Okay. So see, it's better to go for English because all your resources are, all your standard books are printed in English. If you go for your own, suppose somebody prepares in Marathi, it is possible to do that, but you have to give more efforts to find the right sources. Probably you will not get the resources so easily available for all the topics. But there have been several cases, several students who have prepared with their native language as the medium of language. It is very much possible. But I would urge that if you are decently comfortable even with English, you go for English, because then you don't have to spend too much effort into finding the right sources. They're easily available. I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of the question.
It was what UPSC expects from the candidates.
Okay. So see, you must be knowing there are three parts of the exam. One is prelims, mains, and interview. So prelims is just a screening process, so I'm not going to talk about that. Mains, generally it looks for the way you think. So UPSC is not going to ask factual questions. Maybe a small part of that may have, but most of the questions are going to be opinion based. So they are going to look at how do you form a balanced opinion by looking at different perspectives. Okay. So everything that we have, for example, today we are facing this issue of lockdown. So there are so many issues attached to it. There is economic aspect, there's political aspect, there is social aspect, there's technological aspect, there's environmental aspect, there's legal aspect. So UPSC tries to evaluate how do you connect these several dots together. You should, when you are asked about an opinion, you should be able to factor in all these different perspectives and then give a balanced answer. What general mistake happens is that if it's suppose it's economics paper and if some question has been asked related to economics, students generally feel or aspirants generally feel that since this is economics paper, I have to answer from economics perspective only, whereas that is not the case. There have been cases when geography questions have been asked in history. There have been cases when political questions have been asked in geography, because UPSC expects you to connect different dots. You have the holistic picture. You can't just have a narrow approach. Okay, I hope that answers. And when you come to interview, it's a different story. They are not really concerned. They are not judging you on the knowledge that you have, because that they've already done in your mains examination. They're trying to look at what kind of a personality you are. Whether can you form balanced opinions about things? Are you something who is very short-tempered, or what are your ethical values? They try to evaluate you on those things. So interviews are it's not that difficult, because you have to be yourself. You just go and just show them what kind of personality you are, and you have to show some more strong moral values. That's it. It's not something which is it's a test of your knowledge. It's not like that. But yes, mains is something that you really need to work upon.
Okay, sir, one more question which is often asked by the aspirants, that what is the appropriate time to start studying for UPSC, like within your graduation? I think you might be having this question so often, even before also.
Yeah, and to that I have only one answer, that the earlier you start, the better it is, right? Because you have so much to cover. The syllabus is really vast. It's not that it's very difficult. It's difficult to cover. It's not impossible to cover. So the earlier you start, it is. I would suggest that if you have already made a decision of giving this examination, and if you're already into first year, second year of engineering, not much, but if you can at least give 1 hour per day, if you can at least read the newspaper every day and get to know the current affairs. By newspaper, I don't mean reading only the headlines, going into the analysis of every topic. At least look at the question papers and see what kind of questions are asked based on the current headlines. What is it? Then you will get to know what is it expected from you. And then based on that, you form your own opinions. At least you'll train your mind on thinking in that logical way, of taking into account various perspectives. At least that much, if it can be done, it will really help you And probably then you become to the third year and fourth year, then you can accelerate a bit and give more time to it.
Right. Sir, there is one question that how to prepare UPSC without coaching. I remember one of your interviews I seen on YouTube in which you said that guidance is more important than coaching. That was in Marathi. So what is your take on this? How,
Yeah, true.
how much is the impact that coaching institutions bring in?
See, when I discussed about the myths of UPSC, this was one of my points that you don't need to go for coaching because everything is available on internet. It is right there in front of you. So if there is someone who feels that no, I cannot prepare on my own, or I'm feeling too lost, maybe then you should go for classes. But otherwise, I don't think it is an absolute necessary today. Yes, you need to find the right person to guide you. You need to have the right mentor. That is there. If you have that, and I don't think coaching is something which is really necessary because what happens, I've seen this in Delhi, many of my friends who are preparing, I've seen that what happens is you spend a lot of time in the classroom also. And remember, the time you're spending in classroom is the time taken away from your self-study, right? So you may get, so the purpose of joining coaching class is somebody teaching you geography or somebody teaching you history. Now, is it something like a very technical subject? Can't we just understand by reading it? Of course we can. It's something that we have already learned through our childhood. So no topic of UPSC is a technical topic. It's a very simple topic. It's just about connecting dots, as I said before. It's nothing difficult to understand. You just have to connect different dots together. And this is something even coaching cannot teach you. That you have to learn from your own, through your own self-assessment, through your writing practice, through your own thinking, changing the way you think. So coaching, maybe it will help you in overcoming your commitment problem, in giving you all the resources combined together in one place. Maybe that is all it will help you, but I don't think it is absolutely necessary today. You may find every year you may find so many toppers who say that they did not join any coaching class. I did not join any coaching class. I had just joined the test series from Delhi, and I used to write from my home. So I did not step out of my house when I was preparing for UPSC. Of course, when you go for mock interviews, you have to go. At that time. I strongly suggest that you go for mock interviews. You do conduct those mock interviews in Delhi because the level of preparation there is way beyond what we have in any other part of the country. So you must go for preparation of mock interviews to Delhi, but not for any other purpose.
Right. Sir, there are few questions about how to prepare for current affairs, which is another big factor in UPSC.
Okay. So see, I've mentioned already about Indian Express. That was my primary paper. I used to read two newspapers. One was Indian Express and the second was Hindu. But I used to read only editorials from the Hindu because Hindu has very good editorials. So what I suggest is you go through your primary paper thoroughly, Indian Express, which has so much of content. You go through that, then you go through the editorials of Hindu, and then through that you make your own notes. Okay, so now there's a way. There are different ways of making notes. What I used to do is, suppose I make a notebook for, say, economics. Okay, I'll make one notebook for economics, a separate notebook for history, a separate notebook for some other paper, or paper wise. We can go for paper wise also. There are 4 general studies paper. Whenever I find any good article about any one topic, then I would make an entry of that article. Short notes, whatever I find. You might find 2 good points, 5 good points, 10 good points, whatever you have, you write it down in that particular notebook allotted to that paper. Okay, suppose you find one for GS1, one notebook allotted to GS1 and a good article on that. Then I'll make an index, and in the index, I'll write down the name of the topic. And then when I write that topic, I'll note down 3 good points that I've noticed today, and then I leave 2 pages blank, so that tomorrow or maybe 1 month later or sometime later, if I read a topic related to that topic, I should have space to add those points also. So what happens is that at the end of it, when you're going revising again, all the good points that you had collected, you find it at one place. One topic, all points on one page or 2 pages. And then you can do indexing on the page number. You can number the pages, and on page number 1, you know that this is the topic. Page number 2, this is the topic. So what happens is that all the topics, you collect the notes topic wise. And then it depends on you how you want to divide it. You want to divide it subject wise, you want to divide it paper wise, that's up to you. But it really helped me. And on top of that, what is important is that this is something related to note making, is that it's very important that you know that you score some brownie points in your answer writing. And how do you do that? You can do that through quoting the reports, the latest report, or you can do that through some popular quotes. Okay, so there are different ways of doing it, and you can have a separate notebook for that. You can have a separate notebook in which you can say, suppose this notebook you have dedicated for these quotes. Its first topic is about gender equality, and then you write down in a similar fashion. You do the indexing, and then on one page you write down all the reports. I don't mean to say the entire report. Just if you frequently you read in newspaper, right? This report said that this percentage of XXY ABCD are found in this condition. Similar those kind of reports, you can write it on one page, and then when you use those figures in your answers, mains answer, it helps you to score brownie point. Of course, you look it from the perspective of the paper checker. There's one person who has just written, this is the generalist, very general kind of answer, and there's one person who has quoted some popular quotes or has quoted some report. Then that person obviously score good marks. Like Lancet reports are frequently reported related to health. You can say the Lancet report says this, or McKinsey says this. Okay, so but you need to have a copy. You need to note down this point somewhere at one place.
Right. Yes, I think you have extensively emphasized on all the topics. Most of the points are already. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Most of the topics are already explained by you within your session itself. Yeah, I think that's it for the question and answer session, because the common topics like how to get focused, how to prepare for multiple subjects at a time, how to change your mindset from objective to subjective. I think you have also talked on it, and there are many resources already available about it. So yeah, I think that is for question and answer session. Thank you so much, sir, for extensively sharing your experiences with us. We might be so insightful that all the engineers and audience that we have today. I think this is one of the reasons that the analytical skills that you shown, that how to prepare and how what are the do's and what are the don'ts. I think this is one of the reasons that we see that percentage of engineering graduates appearing and also cracking the UPSC is increasing nowadays. So once again, thank you so much, sir, for sharing these insights with us.